Good afternoon, everyone. We are the Group 4. Our report is about strategic capacity management. At the end of the report, we will be able to define capacity and strategic capacity, discuss the capacity utilization, determine the best operating level, identify reasons why capacity decisions are among the most fundamental of all the design decisions that managers must make. Name techniques that are useful for evaluating capacity alternatives from an economic standpoint.
To start, capacity is another major aspect for operations managers. Managing capacity is common for both manufacturing and service elements in making certain the total provision of the precise volume of goods and services to end customers. The operations manager needs to distinguish the overall, company-wide capacity as well as department-specific capacity inputs and outputs in-house. This will allow the operations managers to schedule without having bottleneck in certain areas. So bakit nga ba siya naging major aspect? Kasi sobrang importante na ma-highlight yung capacity dahil when it comes to capacity, dito nakasaalang-alang ang kapasidad na kayang gawin at service na kayang ibigay ng isang company. For example na lang po, sa Eka Bakes. Dalawa lang po kami ng boyfriend ko na nagpapatakbo ng baking business na yon at hindi pwedeng tanggap lang kami ng tanggap ng orders per day. Bakit? Dahil meron din kaming pasok at hindi lahat ng oras is pwedeng mailaan lang sa business. Kaya kung tatanggap pa kami ng hihigit pa sa capacity na kaya namin gawin, automatic na hindi namin ito matatapos bahil sa aming schedule or timeline. Capacity management in operations. The capacity management aspect, once framed in a long-term strategic perspective, revolves around matching of accessible capacity to demand or making certain capacity available to meet the demand variations. This is done on both the intermediate and short time horizons. Capacity management is very vital for achieving the organizational objectives of efficiency, customer service, and effectiveness in general. Sinasabi lang dito na important talaga sa operations na ma-determine at ma-manage ng mabuti ang capacity para mas maging efficient ang paggawa under the operations. Kasi kung hindi bibigyang pansin yung capacity, magkakaroon ng problem sa production. For example na lang, meron tayong pinoproduce na 2 produkto ngunit magkaiba ng level of demand. Kumbaga, kaya tayo nagde-determine at nagmamanage ng capacity ay para masuplayan ng mga demands na ito. Hindi kasi pwedeng mag-focus ka lang sa isang produkto at mapapabayaan mo na yung nasabi pang isang produkto. Kumbaga, kaya tayo may ginagamit na capacity ay para mas malimitahan ang dami ng paggawa na sapat lang para sa kanya-kanyang demands ng mga ito. Capacity defined. Let us now define the word capacity. Capacity is the possible output of a system that may be produced in a particular time, determined by the size, scale, and configuration of the system's transformation inputs. At all stages in any process, limitations are placed on capacity. A machine has a maximum output per hour. A truck has a maximum load. A production line has a limit to its speed of operation. An airplane has a certain number of seats passengers, and a computer processes a specified number of bytes per second, and so on. For example na lang, ang isang truck na pang-deliver ng buhangin ay mayroon lang ibinigay na 250 per cubic na maaaring ikargang buhangin. Pero hindi mo ito sinunod at dinagdagan mo pa at nag-end up to 300 per cubic. So ano ang pwedeng mangyari? Pwede siyang matimbang at magbayad ng penalty o kaya naman pwedeng may masira sa truck dahil sa hindi na nito kinaya ang bigat kasi sobra-sobra na sa nasabing kapasidad nito. Sa madaling salita, ito lang ang posibleng kayang i-handle ng isang tao or bagay. Functionally, capacity can be described in 3 useful definitions. First, design capacity is the maximum output of a process under ideal conditions. Second, effective capacity is the maximum output that can be realistically expected under normal conditions. Usually, effective capacity is less than designed capacity. due to setup times, breakdowns, stoppages, maintenance, and so on. Whilst this is true in many cases, especially in materials processing operations, there are instances in which effective capacity may be greater than design capacity. For example, under normal conditions, it might be thought a hotel could sell a rooms for only once in a 24-hour period. But some hotels, those at airports for instance, routinely sell their rooms more than once per day. Third, actual output is the rate of output actually achieved. It cannot exceed effective capacity and if often less than effective capacity owing to breakdown, defective output, shortages of materials, and other similar factors. It will normally be lower than effective capacity. This will certainly be the case if capacity is not managed well. Excess capacity arises when actual production is less than what is feasible or optimal for a firm. This often means that the demand in the market for the product is less than what the firm could potentially supply to the market. Excess capacity is inefficient and will cause manufacturers to acquire additional cost or drop market share. So after natin mabigay yung 3 useful definitions ng capacity which are the design capacity, effective capacity, and actual output, is magbigay tayo ng isang example na related sa tatlong nabanggit. Sa design capacity, ito yung theoretical maximum output, kumbaga ito yung pinaka-pino-foresee na maximum capacity na walang kino-consider na problems na as in good conditions lahat. Halimbawa na lang dito, sa isang trucking business as in yung truck mo walang kahit anong issues at kayang ibiyahe ng ibiyahe ay walang masisira. Tapos sa mismong biyahe ng truck walang magiging delays kaya dahil all is in good conditions naman, pwede nating iset ang maximum capacity niya per day ng 5 rounds. So dito naman papasok yung effective capacity which is kailangan na natin i-consider lahat ng kailangang harapin under operation sa pagde-deliver ng isang truck. Halimbawa na lang, nitong pandemic na obliga ang lahat ng trucking na mag-iba at dumaan sa mas mahabang ruta sa kadahilan ng maraming mga daan ang nagsara dahil nga lockdown. At dahil dito, mas humaba ang i-consume na time sa pagde-deliver ng isang truck na kung nung una ay 1 hour lang per truck, ay umabot na ng 2 hours may deliver lang ito. Dahil nga sa nahaba ng biyahe from 5 rounds per day under design capacity, ay magiging 2 to 3 na lang sa effective capacity, which is ito na yung realistic na output. Last is the actual output, which is the final outcome. Wala nang kailangan pang i-foresee dahil ito na yung kinalabasan ng operation. Kaya in relation sa example, dahil sa lahat ng kailangan i-consider, 3 trucks lang ang naging output sa loob ng isang araw. Capacity planning concepts. Capacity planning is the process of establishing the output rate that can be realized over a period of time by a facility. The aim of operations management is to bring a product or service to customers at the time they need it, to a fitting quality standard, and at a price they are ready to pay. The role of capacity planning and scheduling management in making this aim feasible is to make sure the products and services are accessible when needed by the consumer. This is achieved by managing processes as efficiently as possible. The management of capacity focuses on 2 aspects of the operation. Dito sa capacity planning, ito yung kasunod ng capacity defined, kung saan dito na ino-organize ang pagpaprocess ng mga outputs in a period of time. First, transformation inputs and the organization into processes. The resources used to process the final output are referred to as transformation inputs. They include both hard systems like plant, machinery, and technology, as well as soft systems like work processes and the workforce. Capacity planning is primarily concerned with the effective and efficient use of these transformation inputs. In operations management terms, at the operations level, this is commonly and variously referred to as capacity planning, aggregate planning, or master scheduling. Capacity management activities for separate processes in an operation include production control, loading, and activity scheduling. Second, the flow of inputs through the system determines how efficiently the transformation inputs are utilized. This necessitates the implementation of an appropriate inventory management strategy. Inventory management, material requirement planning, manufacturing, resource planning, and just-in-time production are examples of such strategies. The most important concept in capacity planning is to find the medium between an organization's long-term supply and capabilities and the predicted level of long-term demand. Organizations must also plan for actual capacity changes, changes in consumer wants and demand, changes in technology, and even changes in the environment. Managers must consider both qualitative and quantitative aspects of the business when evaluating options for capacity planning. These factors include economic factors, public opinion, and managers' personal preferences. Capacity planning takes into account both long-term and short-term considerations. Long-term considerations are concerned with the overall level of capacity. Short-term considerations are variations in capacity requirements that correspond to seasonal, random, and irregular fluctuations in demand. The three key inputs must be considered when considering capacity planning within a company. The three inputs are the type of capacity to be determined, the amount of product required, and the time frame for which the product will be considered necessary.
After we define capacity and discuss the concepts of capacity planning, let us now define the strategic capacity planning. So, strategic capacity planning is an approach for identifying and establishing a company's entire production capacity. It is utilized for capital-intensive resources, including plant, machinery, and labor. Strategic capacity planning is critical because it helps the organization meet its long-term goals. Planning ensures that operating expenditures are maintained to a minimum while maintaining quality. It ensures that the firm remains competitive and achieves its long-term growth goals. Strategic capacity planning is the process through which businesses determine the amount of production capacity required to fulfill customer demand. It is a challenging procedure for a variety of reasons. The first reason is that it is dependent on precise demand forecast. Most firms struggle with demand forecasting, typically owing to a misunderstanding of how to use the data at their disposal. Capacity management is a challenging task since it is difficult to balance production with efficient capacity. However, the distinction between utilization and efficiency may be demonstrated by distinguishing between designed capacity and effective capacity. Capacity utilization, on the other hand, is a measure of how well a company utilizes its productive capacity. It is the connection between the theoretical maximum output and the actual output. Engaging in the promotional activities and introducing new ways by which product value can be increased, which in turn increases the production rate, which leads to maximum capacity utilization. The ratio of actual production to intended capacity is known as utilization, whereas the ratio of output to effective capacity is known as efficiency. Management in certain organizations puts an emphasis on utilization. For example, key performance measures in many capacity-constrained services, such as hotels, airlines, and theaters, are utilization measures, namely room occupancy, passenger load, and seat occupancy. Other activities, particularly those that use high-volume production techniques, put a priority on efficiency. Capacity utilization is the percentage of available capacity that is actually well used. Capacity utilization can be calculated by dividing the actual output rate by the capacity, then multiplying the result by 100%. There are two common measures of capacity, which are the design and effective capacity. Design capacity under ideal conditions, this is the greatest production rate that a facility can achieve. Design capacity can only be maintained for a limited amount of time. A corporation reaches this output rate by employing a variety of short-term strategies such as overtime, overstaffing, maximizing equipment use, and subcontracting. The design capacity rate is calculated by dividing the actual output by the design capacity and multiplying the result by 100%. Number 2 is effective capacity. Under typical circumstances, this is the greatest production rate that can be maintained. These circumstances consist of realistic work schedules and breaks, regular personnel levels, periodic machine maintenance, and none of the interim procedures used to attain design capacity. In most cases, however, effective capacity is smaller than design capacity. The formula for determining the effective capacity is to divide the actual output by the effective capacity, then multiply the result by 100%. Let's have a sample problem here. A Serrano's bakery has design capacity of 32 cupcakes per day and effective capacity of 20 cupcakes per day. Currently, it is baking 27 cupcakes per day. Compute for the bakery capacity utilization both for design and effective capacity. Let us first compute the design capacity. To get the design capacity, divide the actual output, which is 27 cupcakes per day, by the design capacity of 32 cupcakes per day. Then multiply the result by 100%. So the answer for the design capacity is 84.38%. On the other hand, to calculate the effective capacity, divide the actual output of 27 cupcakes per day by the effective capacity of 20 cupcakes per day multiplied by 100%. So the answer will be 135%. In the sample problem, we can notice that the effective capacity is greater than the design capacity, which is very rare because, like what I've said a while ago, design capacity is typically larger than effective capacity in most cases.
After the discussion of capacity utilization, let's now proceed to the discussion of best operating level and making capacity decisions. Best operating level for a facility is the percent of capacity utilization that minimizes average unit cost. Sa madaling salita, ito yung level of capacity kung saan dinedesign or pinaplano nila yung process of production to achieve the target volume of output na makapagbibigay ng lower unit cost sa kanila. Halos lahat ng company ay tinatry na mag-operate close to this point or level. If demand is consistently higher than the best operating level, then they increase the capacity to lower the cost close to the best operating level cost. For example, engineers design engines and assembly lines to operate at an ideal or best operating level to maximize output and minimize costs. Next is the capacity cushion. It is the additional capacity added to regular capacity requirements to provide greater flexibility. In simple terms, ito yung amount of capacity na sobra doon sa expected demand, kumbaga, reserba. For example, if the expected monthly demand on a facility is 500,000 worth of goods or services, and it can produce as much as 550,000, it has a 10% capacity cushion. High levels of output tend to cost less per unit, called economies of scale. This holds true when, first, fixed costs can be spread over a larger number of units. Habang dumarami kasi yung units na pinoproduce natin, mas maraming maghahati doon sa fixed cost ng production. Second, kapag walang direct relationship between production costs and output levels. Third, quantity discounts are available for material purchases. And lastly, yung efficiency ng production dapat nag-i-increase habang tumatagal. Ibig sabihin kasi nun, workers gain experience na from the past production of products. Economies and diseconomies of scale. Makakatulong to para mas maintindihan natin yung graph na i-discuss ko mamaya. First, economies of scale. Ito yung senaryo kung saan habang dumarami yung product na pinoproduce, bumababa yung unit cost or price per unit of the same product. Second, diseconomies of scale. Ito naman yung senaryo kung saan habang nababawasan yung product na pinoproduce, tumataas yung unit cost or price per unit of the same product. In this graph, the y-axis represents the average cost per the given product and the x-axis represents the volume of production of the given product. Makikita natin dito na yung average unit cost of the output will increase as the volume of the product decreases. Under utilization, ito yung situation of not utilizing resources to the fullest capacity. While overutilization, ito yung situation kung saan yung capacity utilization reaches its peak. You are unable to meet the rising demands. And it can lead to low quality products. So in order to get the best operating level, company must attain economies of scale. Kailangan mag-produce sila ng maraming products para ma-reduce yung per unit average cost of production. In this graph, y and x-axis represent the same variables as they do on the first graph. Makikita natin dito na economies of scale do not continue indefinitely. As plants produce more units, they gain experience in their production methods, which in turn results in reducing the per unit cost of production in a predictable manner. Habang dumarami naman yung production nila, lumalaki yung chance na magkaroon ng diseconomies of scale. Pwedeng magkaroon ng equipment breakdown, pwedeng bumaba yung quality ng mga products, and pwede rin kasi magkaroon ng difficulty when it comes to the coordination and management activities. For example, dito sa graph, nag-produce sila ng 400 units, pero hindi nila inaasahan na magbabago yung preferences of customers. Ano ngayon mangyayari sa high volume of products na pinroduce nila? Magkakaroon sila ngayon ng excess capacity and unstable inventory. And dahil dito, malaki yung chance na bumaba yung volume of production na magli-lead to higher unit costs. Always remember that operating a facility close to the best operating level is important because of the impact of costs. Making capacity decisions. The capacity decisions within a company are very important because they help determine the limit of output and provide a major insight to determining operating costs. Isa ito sa mga fundamental design decisions na kailangan gawin ng isang manager. Number 1. Sinasabi lang dito na yung capacity decision is nakaka-apekto doon sa ability ng organization na ma-meet nila yung future demands for products and service. Yung pagkakaroon ng capacity to satisfy the demand of the customers can allow the company to take advantage doon sa opportunity na yun. Number 2, sinasabi lang dito na may effects sa operating cost yung capacity decision ng isang company. Of course, gusto ng isang company na yung capacity and demand requirements will be matched. However, hindi maiiwasan na yung actual demand is magkaiba doon sa expected demand. Dito pumapasok yung capacity decision para mabalance yung cost of overcapacity and undercapacity. Number 3, sinasabi dito na yung capacity is isa sa mga factor para ma-determine yung initial cost. Typically, the greater the capacity of the productive unit, the greater its cost. Number 4, sa capacity decisions kasi, usually long-term commitment ito. Once kasi na na-implement na yung decision, mahirap na baguhin yun. Or worse, imposible na mabago. Number 5, capacity decisions can also affect competitiveness. Halimbawa, if the company has excess capacity or madali lang para sa kanila na mag-add ng capacity, pwede yun maging barrier to entry the other firm. Number 6, capacity affects the ease of management. Obviously, yung pagkakaroon ng appropriate capacity makes management easier kumpara sa pagkakaroon ng mismatched capacity. An organization needs to examine the alternatives for future capacity from a number of different perspectives. Most obvious are economic considerations. Will an alternative be economically feasible? How much will it cost? How soon can we have it? What will operating and maintenance costs be? What will its useful life? Will it be compatible with present personnel and present operations? Maraming technique na useful sa pag-evaluate ng capacity alternatives from an economic standpoint, katulad ng cost-volume analysis, financial analysis, decision theory, and waiting line analysis na i-discuss later on.
Let's now talk about cost-volume analysis. The cost-volume analysis examines the relationships between cost, revenue, and output volume. The primary objective of cost-volume analysis is to estimate an organization's income under various operating conditions. It is especially useful for comparing capacity alternatives. The application of cost-volume analysis necessitates the identification of all costs associated with the production of a given product. These costs are then classified as either fixed or variable. Fixed costs such as rental cost, property taxes, equipment cost, heating and cooling expenses, and certain administrative costs tend to remain constant regardless of output volume. Even if no goods are produced, fixed costs are always evident. Therefore, we can say that fixed costs cannot be avoided. On the other hand, variable costs are directly proportional to output volume. This type of cost is directly affected by the variations in the activity level of the company. The major components of variable cost are generally raw materials and labor cost, and it is assumed that the variable cost per unit remains constant regardless of output volume. The total cost associated with a given volume of output is equal to the sum of the fixed cost and the variable cost per unit times volume. This is illustrated as TC equals FC plus VC, and then VC equals Q times V, wherein V means variable cost per unit, TC means total cost, FC means fixed cost, VC means total variable cost, Q means quantity or volume of output. The volume at which total cost and total revenue are equal is referred to as break-even point. When volume is less than the break-even point, there is a loss. But when volume is greater than the break-even point, there is a profit. Total profit can be computed using the formula P equals TR minus TC equals R times Q minus open parenthesis, FC plus V minus Q, close parenthesis. While the required volume needed to generate a specified profit is computed as Q equals P plus FC divided by R minus V times Q. The volume of output required for total revenue to equal total cost is an example of this. And this is the break-even point, which can be calculated using the formula Q sub BEP equals FC divided by R minus V, wherein FC means fixed cost, VC means a total variable cost, V means variable cost per unit, TC means a total cost, TR means total revenue, R means revenue per unit, Q means quantity or volume of output, Q sub BEP means break-even quantity, P means profit. It was previously stated that cost-volume analysis can be a useful tool for comparing capacity alternatives if certain assumptions are met. First, there is only one product involved. Second, everything that is made can be sold. Third, the variable cost per unit remains constant regardless of volume. Fourth, fixed costs do not change in response to volume changes, or they change in steps. Fifth, the revenue per unit remains constant regardless of volume. And lastly, the revenue per unit is greater than the variable cost per unit. Let's have a sample problem here to illustrate the concepts related to cost-volume analysis. The owner of Craving for Breads, J. De La Cruz, is contemplating adding a new line of breads which will require leasing new equipment for a monthly payment of 6,000 pesos. Variable cost would be 2 pesos per pie, and pies would retail for 7 pesos each. The questions are: number 1, how many pies must be sold in order to break even? Number 2, what would the profit or loss be if 1,000 pies are made and sold in a month? Number 3, how many pies must be sold to realize a profit of 4,000 pesos? So, in this sample problem, we have 3 givens. First is the fixed cost, which is 6,000 pesos. That is the monthly payment for the lease of new equipment. Second, the variable cost, which is 2 pesos per pie. Lastly, the revenue per unit, which is 7 pesos. To answer the question number 1, we're just going to use the formula for break-even point. That is Q sub BEP equals FC divided by R minus V. And then we're just going to plot the given information in the formula. That is Q sub BEP equals 6,000 pesos, that is the fixed cost, divided by the difference between the revenue per unit, which is 7 pesos, and variable cost per unit, which is 2 pesos. So the answer would be 1,200 breads or pies per month must be sold in order to break even. To answer the question number 2, we're going to use this formula. P equals Q, open parenthesis, R minus V, close parenthesis, minus FC. And then, we're just going to plot the given information in the formula. P equals 1,000, open parenthesis, 7 pesos minus 2 pesos, close parenthesis, minus 6,000 pesos. The answer is 1,000 pesos loss. Meaning, if 1,000 pies are made and sold in a month, there would be a 1,000 pesos loss.
To answer the last question, we're going to use this formula. Q equals P plus FC divided by R minus V. And then again, we're just going to plot the given information in the formula. That is, Q equals the sum of profit amounting to 4,000 pesos and fixed cost amounting to 6,000 pesos divided by the difference between the revenue per unit, which is 7 pesos, and variable cost per unit, which is 2 pesos. The answer is 2,000 breads or pies must be sold in order to realize a profit of 4,000 pesos. After discussing cost volume analysis, let's now talk about financial analysis. Managers are frequently confronted with a problem of allocating limited resources. A common approach to resolve this is to use financial analysis to rank investment proposals. Cash flow and present value are two crucial concepts in financial analysis. So, when we say cash flow, it refers to the difference between the cash received from sales of goods or services and other sources and the cash outflow for labor, materials, overhead, and taxes. Moreover, when we say present value, it expresses in current value the sum of all future cash flows of an investment proposal. The three most common financial analysis methods are payback, present value, and internal rate of return. When there is a high degree of certainty associated with estimates of future cash flows, these three techniques or methods are appropriate to use. Let us briefly discuss the three most common financial analysis methods one by one. Let's start with payback. Payback is a simple but widely used method that focuses on how long it will take for an investment to recover its original cost. The time value of money is ignored in the context of payback. That is, the payback period differs from the break-even time, which accounts for inflation, interest, and so forth. In addition, the application of payback is easier to justify in short-term projects than in long-term ones. The second method is the present value method. This method condenses or summarizes the initial cost of an investment, its estimated annual cash flows, and any expected salvage value into a single value known as the equivalent current value, while taking into account for the time value of money. Present value is also known as discounted value, and it is a financial calculation used to determine the current value of a future sum of money or cash flow in today's dollars at a given rate of return. In layman's terms, it compares the purchasing power of a dollar in the future to the purchasing power of a dollar today. Last but not the least is the internal rate of return. This method converts an investment proposal's initial cost, expected annual cash flows, and estimated future salvage value into an equivalent interest rate. In other words, this method defines the rate of return that equates the projected future returns with the initial cost.
The third technique for evaluating capacity alternative is the decision theory. So what is decision theory? Decision theory is a helpful tool for financial comparison of alternatives under conditions of risk or uncertainty. It is suited to capacity decisions and to a wide range of other decisions managers must make. Si decision theory daw ay nagsiserve as general approach to decision making and mas suitable daw ito if the operation management decisions ay wide range, meaning mas madaming pwedeng alternative and solutions ang maaaring pagpilian ni manager. For example, product and service design, equipment selection, location planning, and product mix credit policies. Before, simplest decision problems daw can be resolved by listing lang all the possible monetary consequences and yung associated probability ng bawat alternative, and then calculating the monetary values ng lahat ng alternatives. And after that, is selecting the alternative na with the highest expected monetary value. But now, yung determination daw ng optimal alternatives ay mas naging complicated na, lalo na if yung alternatives involves sequences of decisions. For example, may dalawa tayong alternative na pinagpipilian. Let's say A and B. And after choosing A, kailangan pa ulit nating mamili between A1, A2, and A3. So, ganyan siya. So, what are the elements in order for a person or institution to have a good decision or to analyze a decision? So, there are three components to any decision. First is the choices available or the alternatives. So, ito daw yung different possible strategies or choices na pinagpipilian ni decision maker. And the second one is the states of nature or factor. Ito naman yung mga future events na hindi control ni decision maker na once na mag-occur ay maapektuhan nito ang magiging results ng decision na gagawin. So, kailangan daw ma-identify natin lahat ng possible future events na makakaapekto sa decision natin at yung epekto nun sa decision. And then the last one is the payoffs or the consequences. Ito naman yung mga consequence na nag-result by combining a decision alternative and a state of nature. So, may tinatawag din tayong payoff table. So, dito nakalagay lahat ng possible combinations ng alternatives and the states of nature. Yung decision daw na ginagawa natin ay nakadepende kung anong type siya ng environment. And the type of environment na yon also influences kung paano tayo magde-decide. So, there are three types of environment in which decisions are made. The first one is the certainty. Sa type daw ng decision-making environment na to, isa lang ang pwedeng event na mag-occur. Though mahirap siya i-predict in most of the business decisions, but if routine type of decision naman daw yon, ay madali na lang malaman yung certainty ng outcome. The second one is the uncertainty. Ito naman yung opposite ng certainty. If the certainty, isa lang ang event na maaaring mag-occur, dito naman sa uncertainty ay may dalawa o higit pang event ang maaaring mag-take place. Sa environment na to ay walang idea si decision maker kung ano ba yung mangyayari in the future. Nag-a-arise daw ito if the event is determined by the external factors like the demand for product and the moves of the competitors. And then the last one is the risk. Katulad ng uncertainty, may dalawa o higit pang outcome ang pwedeng mag-take place dito. Ang kaibahan lang niya ay may adequate information si decision maker to assign probability if mangyayari ba o hindi ang isang event. Generally, based daw iyon sa past experiences. If si decision maker daw ay gagawa ng decision under uncertainty, may 5 approach siya na pwedeng pagpilian. The first one is the maximin. Dito, pipiliin yung pinakamagandang payoff sa lahat ng pinakapangit na payoff. The second one is the maximax. Dito naman, pipiliin yung pinakamagandang payoff sa lahat ng pinakamagagandang payoff. The third one is the Laplace. Dito, naka-average na yung payoff ng bawat alternative and then pipiliin na lang yung may pinakamagandang payoff. The fourth one is the minimax regret. Dito naman, pipiliin yung pinaka-worst na payoff sa lahat ng pinaka-worst na payoff. And then the last one is the regret or the opportunity loss. Dito naman, yung difference between the given payoff and the best payoff yung pipiliin. Decision making under risk naman, so may isa lang, expected monetary value or the EMV. The criterion is the best expected value among the alternatives. May tinatawag din tayong decision trees. So the first one is the decision tree. Decision tree is a semantic representation of the available alternatives and their possible consequences. So second, expected value of perfect information or EVPI. The difference between the expected payoff with perfect information and the expected payoff under risk. And then the last one is the sensitivity analysis, determining the range of probability for which an alternative has the best expected payoff. So let's have an example. You're an Olympic skier. In practice today, you fell down and hurt your ankle. Based on the result of an X-ray, the doctor thinks that it's broken with probability of 0.2. So, the question is, should you ski in the race tomorrow? If you ski, you think you'll win with probability of 0.1. If your leg is broken and you ski on it, then you'll damage it further. So your utilities are as follows. If you win the race and your leg isn't broken, so positive 10. If you win and your leg is broken, positive 50. If you lose and your leg isn't broken, so your utility is 0. If you lose and your leg is broken, the utility is negative 50. If you don't ski, if your leg is broken, your utility is negative 10. And if it isn't broken, so it's 0. The requirements are first, draw the decision tree for this problem, and then the second one, evaluate the tree, indicating the best action choice and its expected utility. So for the solution, let's say you ski is 0 and you not ski is negative 2. Si Olympic skier ay may 2 option lang siya na pinagpipilian but maraming outcome or event ang pwedeng mangyari. So to visualize it, gamitin natin yung decision tree for the comparison of the alternatives. First, kailangan niyang mamili if mag-i-ski siya or not. If napili niyang hindi mag-ski, may 2 possible outcome ang pwedeng mag-arise. First, hindi siya mag-i-ski at hindi broken yung leg niya, ang utility niya ay 0. And then the second one, if hindi siya mag-i-ski at broken ang leg niya, ang utility niya ay negative 10. On the other hand, kapag naman pinili niyang mag-ski at nanalo siya, may 2 possible outcome ulit na pwedeng mag-arise. First, ay mag-i-ski siya at kapag nanalo at hindi naman broken yung leg niya, ang utility nun ay positive 100. And if broken yung leg niya, positive 50 ang utility. Kapag naman pinili niya na mag-ski at natalo siya, may 2 event ulit na pwedeng mag-take place. First, mag-i-ski siya at kapag natalo at hindi broken yung leg niya, ang utility niya ay 0. At kapag naman broken, may utility siya na negative 50. So by looking at the decision tree, I think the best decision that the skier must do is the decision with the highest or satisfactorily utility, which is the 100. So, using the decision tree, mas ma-evaluate ng maayos yung mga alternative natin sa bawat gagawin nating decision. And then the last technique for evaluating capacity alternative is the waiting line analysis. Waiting line analysis assists service organizations to ensure customers are contented by reducing waiting time. Analysis of lines is often useful for designing service systems. The easiest waiting line model involves a single server, single line, and single phase system. So yung waiting line daw ay na-encounter natin almost everywhere we go. This is common in banks, schools, shopping malls, airport ticket counters, and in hospital emergency rooms. So yung waiting line daw results from overcrowding or elbowing for amenities or when a place becomes filled fast. Basically, these lines are symptoms of bottlenecks operation. So, yung analysis na to ay useful sa managers kasi natutulungan siya nito to choose the capacity level na cost-effective So, paano magiging cost-effective? So, by balancing the cost of having customers with the cost of providing additional capacity. This problem daw can aid by determination the expected cost for various levels of service capacity. The following assumptions are made when using this model. First, the customers are and come from a population that can be considered infinite. Second, the customer arrivals are described by a Poisson distribution with a mean arrival rate of lambda. This means that the time between successive customer arrivals follows an exponential distribution with an average of 1 over lambda. The third one, the customer service rate is described by a Poisson distribution with a mean service rate of mu. This means that the service time for one customer follows an exponential distribution with an average of 1 over mu. And then the last one, the waiting line priority rule is based on first come, first serve. Waiting line system use the following formula. First is the lambda. It is the mean arrival rate of customers or the average number of customers arriving per unit of time. The second one is the mu. It is the mean service rate or the average number of customers that can be served per unit of time. Third one is P is equal to mean arrival rate of customers divided by mean service rate. It is the average utilization of the system. The fourth one is the L is equal to mean arrival rate of customers divided by mean service rate less mean arrival rate of customers. It is the average number of customers in the service system. The fifth one is the L sub Q or the average utilization of the system multiplied by the average number of customers in the service system. And then the sixth one, W is equal to 1 divided by mean service rate less the mean arrival rate of customers. It is the average time spent waiting in the system including the service. Seventh, W sub Q. It is the average utilization of the system multiplied by the average time spent waiting in the system including the service. So it is the average time spent in the waiting in line. So, and then the last one is P sub N. It is the 1 less the average utilization of the system times by the average utilization of the system raised to N. It is the probability that N customers are in the service system at a given time. The service rate must be greater than the arrival rate. That is the mu is greater than the lambda. If mu is greater than the lambda, the waiting line would eventually grow infinitely large. Before using the formulas, check to be sure that the mu is greater than the lambda or the mean service rate is greater than the mean arrival rate of customer. So let's have a sample problem. The computer lab at ABC University has a help desk to assist students on working on a computer spreadsheet assignments. The students patiently form a single line in front of the desk to wait for help. Students are served based on a first-come, first-served priority rule. On average, 15 students per hour arrive at the help desk. Student arrivals are best described using a Poisson distribution. The help desk server can help an average of 20 students per hour, with the service rate being described by an exponential distribution. So calculate the following characteristic of the service system. For the requirement, calculate the following. First, the average utilization of the help desk server. Second, the average number of students in the system. Third, the average number of students waiting in line. Fourth, the average time a student spends in the system. fifth, the average time a student spends waiting in line. And then the last one, the probability of having more than 4 students in the system. Sabi kanina, before we proceed with the formulas or the analysis, i-check daw muna natin if the mu or the mean service rate is greater than the lambda or the mean arrival rate of customers. And as we can see sa given, ang service rate ay 20 per students, which is higher than the arrival rate of 15 per students. So let's now proceed with the formulas. For the first question, ano daw yung average utilization rate? So the formula is P is equal to lambda over mu, or the mean arrival rate divided by the mean service rate. So the arrival rate ay 15 and the service rate ay 20. So 15 divided by 20 is equal to 0.75 or 75%, which is ang average utilization rate natin ay 75%. So for the second question, average number of students in the system. The formula is lambda divided by mu less lambda, or mean arrival rate divided by mean service rate minus mean arrival rate. Again, the mean arrival rate ay 15 and the mean service rate naman ay 20. So, 15 divided by 20 minus 15. So, 20 less 15 is 5, and then 15 divided by 5 is 3. So, the average number of students in the system is 3 students. So, for the third question, average number of students naman daw in the waiting line. So, the formula is P multiplied by L, or average utilization rate multiplied by average number of students in the system. So, the utilization rate is 75% and the average number of students in the waiting line is 3. So, 3 multiplied by 75%, the product is 2.25. Therefore, 2.25 ang average students na nasa waiting line. So, for the fourth question, average time a student spends in the system. So, the formula is 1 divided by mu less lambda, or 1 divided by mean service rate less mean arrival rate. So, 1 divided by 20 less 15. 20 less 15 is 5, and then 1 divided by 5 is 0.20 or 20%. So, per student daw, spend 0.20 per hour or 20 minutes in the system. So, for the fifth question, average time a student spends waiting in line. The formula is P multiply W, or the average utilization multiplied by the average time a student spends in the system. So, the utilization rate is 75% and the average time a student spends in the system is 20%. So, 75% multiplied by 20%, the answer is 0.15 or 15%. Therefore, per student daw spend 0.15 per hour or 9 minutes waiting in line. For alternative solution, we can get the product of 75% and then 12 minutes, we will also get the 9 minutes. And for the last question, the probability of having more than 4 students in the system. So for the formula, hindi natin siya mako-compute using the formula above na 1 less P times P raised to N. But imo-modify natin siya ng konti. Bale, ang new formula na ay 1 less the summation of P sub N. Or 1 less summation of 1 less P multiplied by P raised to N. Bakit siya naging ganyan? If the original formula yung gagamitin natin, ang mako-compute lang na probability ay the probability of getting 4. But ang hinahanap ay getting more than 4 in the system. So let's proceed with the computation. So our P or the utilization rate is 75% and the n is 4. So 1 less the summation of 1 less 0.75 multiply by 0.75 raised to 0 plus 0.75 raised to 1 plus 0.75 raised to 2 plus 0.75 raised to 3 and plus 0.75 raised to 4. So, dun muna tayo sa exponent. So, 1 less summation of 1 less 0.75 times 3.051 which is yung sum nung 0.75 raised to 0 plus 0.75 raised to 1 plus 0.75 raised to 2 plus 0.75 raised to 3 and plus 0.75 raised to 4. So next is yung nakaparenthesis which is yung 1 less 0.75 is equal to 0.25. So ang formula na ay 1 less 0.25 multiply by 3.051. Next is 3.051 multiply natin by 0.25, ang makukuha natin ay 0.7628. So, ang formula na ay 1 less 0.7628. So, to simplify, ang magiging answer ay 0.2372 or 23.72%. So, we have 23.72% chance of having more than 4 students in the line.
Let's now talk about the planning service capacity. Capacity planning and service. Here we compared service to manufacturing. There are 3 important factors in a planning service capacity, which are the location, the time, and the volatility of demand. Let's have first the location. The service capacity must be located near the customers for its convenience. In manufacturing, production takes place and then the goods are distributed to the customers. However, with services, they are totally opposite. The capacity to deliver the service must first be distributed to the customers either physically or through some mediums for communication. Then the service can be produced. To further elaborate, let's have an example. So there's a hotel that is available in another city where customers are not used to. So in planning service capacity for the location, it should be where the customers want to settle. It should be where the customers are and when those customers need it. Another example sa mga car rentals. Kung itatayo sa bundok yan, wala namang ganong tao doon. At kung may tao man doon, hindi naman magagamit doon yung mga kotse. So in location, it should be where the customers are and when those customers need it. So next is the time or the timing of demand. Unlike goods, services cannot be stored for later use. The capacity must be available to produce a service when it is needed. So in goods, it let the customer's wants to be satisfied immediately. Unlike in service, customers should wait. Let's have an example. On a previous airline flight, a customer cannot be given a seat that is unoccupied if the current flight is sold. Merong mga same day flight pero iba ng oras. So kung yung on that particular time ay hindi na puno yung upuan ng eroplano, so hindi pwede na ibigay nila sa iyo upuan na yon kahit na iba yung oras mo. So hindi rin pwede na pag nakabili na yung customer ng ticket on that particular day's flight tapos iuwi para magamit sa ibang araw. So pag ganun, hindi na valid. In service kasi, customers should wait. Also, in service capacity planning for the time, the main concern is the speed of delivery or yung customer's waiting time. For example, yung police or the bombero or on that profession na kailangan sa anumang oras, kung dumating yung time na nangangailangan at urgent, kailangan ba bibilangin pa kung ilan yung pupunta o yung para rumesponde? So, kung ganun yung mangyayari, that will be the cost lang para magkaroon ng problem or to not maintain the capacity. And the last one is the volatility of demand. The volatility of demand on a service delivery system is much higher than on a manufacturing production system for 3 reasons. First, as just mentioned, services cannot be stored. This means that the inventory cannot smooth the demand as in manufacturing. The second reason is that the customers interact directly with the production system, and these customers often have different needs, will have different levels of experience with the process, and may require different numbers of transactions. This contributes to greater variability in the processing time required for each customers, and hence greater variability in the medium capacity needed. The third reason for the greater volatility in service demand is that it is directly affected by customer behavior. Influences on customer behavior ranging from the weather to a major event can directly affect demand for different services. So for examples, banks are likely to experience higher volumes of demand on certain days of week. Another example, go to any restaurant near your campus during spring break and it will be probably almost empty. Or try to book a room at a local hotel during homecoming weekend. So this behavioral effect can be seen over even shorter time frames like yung mga lunch hour rush at bank's drive-thru window. So because of this volatility, the service capacity is often planned in increments as small as to like 10 to 30 minutes, as opposed to the 1 week increments most common in manufacturing. So to cope with peak o yung mga busy demand periods, pwedeng mag-hire ng mga extra workers or outsourcing some or all the services or with pricing and promotion. So, from peak to slow. From peak o yung mga busy demand periods to slow demand periods which maintain the capacity for the demand. So, that's the end of our report about strategic management capacity. Thank you for listening.